Hey man, I'm Jusko from ProblemMoney.com. What happens when you max out a credit card? Is it really that bad? What does it do to your credit score to go all the way up to that limit? That is what we are going to take a look at in this video. Now, normally on this channel, when we talk about credit scores and optimizing your credit scores, we're talking about keeping your credit utilization low. And credit utilization is how much of your total credit limit you are using. So if you got a card with a $1,000 limit and you're using $300 of it, $300 of purchases, well then you had 30% credit utilization, utilizing 30% of that limit. So normally we say staying under 30% is a good way to help your credit score. Getting under 10% of those credit limits, even better. But what happens when you max it out, when you go all the way to the top of that credit limit? What does it really do to your credit score? Is it really that bad to max it out, especially if you're going to pay it off every month? So the short answer is that maxing out a credit card can hurt you temporarily, but if you can pay off that credit card when the bill comes due, well then you are only going to hurt yourself for a short period of time. So yeah, you are going to hurt your credit score when your credit utilization is high, but when you then pay off that credit card, the credit utilization is going to go down again. And one of the things you'll see people say a lot on credit boards when they are discussing credit scores is that credit utilization has no memory, at least in most credit scoring models. And what that means is the credit scoring model is using what your credit utilization is at a certain point. It's not looking at every point in the past to see what your utilization was. So your credit score may go down when your utilization is high, but when your utilization gets low again, your credit score is going to bounce back up. And remember that for most people, your credit score only matters when someone's actually looking at it to assess you for a loan or a credit card. If your credit score goes down and then it goes back up again, it may be that you're the only person really paying attention to it. Now that's the short answer, but of course you should look at your personal circumstances and decide what makes sense for you if you're thinking about maxing out a credit card, because it's not all necessarily about the credit score. Here are some things to think about. First off, how long is your credit history? How good is your credit history? If you have a long credit history, high credit score, if you max out one of your credit cards, it's not necessarily going to set off alarm bells at the credit card companies because you have a long history of building trust with those companies. If you have a shorter history, you haven't had many credit cards, and then you max out one of those cards, well, regardless of what it might do to your credit score, if the credit card companies see that and they think, what is this person doing? They could shut you down a lot quicker than they're going to shut down someone that has a longer history. Related to that is, how often are you maxing out a credit card? If you max out a credit card 1 month and you pay it all off, and then you sort of go back to a situation where you aren't using much of your credit limit, well, that's not necessarily going to raise a lot of alarm bells, and of course your credit score will bounce back to the level it was at. But if you're doing it over and over again every month, you're maxing it out and then you're paying it down and then you're maxing it out, your credit card company could get a little bit nervous that eventually you're going to max it out and not pay it off. And then the third consideration is, how much are those limits to begin with? If you have a card with a very small limit, say it's only $500, well, it's going to be kind of hard not to max it out once in a while, or at least have a high credit utilization because you don't have a whole lot of money to work with. So if you find yourself maxing out a card, if you can pay it off every month, that's when after a few months, 3 to 6 months, call your credit card company and you say, hey, I'm maxing this out, I'm paying it off, you can see I'm doing everything I should, but it would be a lot easier if I could get a credit limit increase, and then I would not be using as much of my total credit. And if they can see a track record, there's a pretty good chance that they would raise that limit. And just to hit that last point a little bit harder, if you know you are going to be maxing out your credit card, it doesn't hurt to call the credit card company beforehand and say, here is the situation, here is what is going to happen. Yes, you're going to have a faceless customer service representative who's just going to be looking at a screen full of your information. So it's not like you're building up a great relationship there, but you are trying. You are trying to tell them beforehand, here is what is happening. Or you could call after you have done it and say, here is why I did it. Anything you can do to have some communication is going to make it more likely that you're not going to get your card shut down if you're hitting those credit limits, especially when you have very low limits. Some people really hate the idea of calling in and talking to someone on the phone. Maybe they're afraid they're not going to communicate their situation very well, or that telling the credit card company is actually going to alert them to the fact that you're using a lot of your credit limit and they're going to shut you down because you you told them, and maybe they wouldn't have noticed otherwise. But I think it is always good to talk to the bank and tell them what is happening versus just hoping that they don't notice. A lot of times people give credit card companies a hard time about their business practices, and oftentimes rightly so. But if you think about what a credit card is, it's a pretty sweet deal. You've got a bank that doesn't know you, has never met you, is lending you money potentially for free as long as you pay it back within the grace period, and they're just trusting you to pay it back. So that's a pretty sweet deal for you. So if you know that you're going to use all the money that they are lending you 1 month, it doesn't hurt for you to call them in and say, hey, my friend that lent me all that money without even knowing me, I'm going to use most of it, but I tell you, I'm going to pay it back. So maxing out a credit card every once in a while, not necessarily the worst thing in the world, not going to tank your credit score in any permanent way. Really, the bigger danger is that you are going to make the credit card company nervous, especially if you don't have much of a credit history, that you are not going to pay them back, and you don't want to get your cards shut down. So you definitely don't want to consistently be maxing out your credit cards. And again, if you don't have much of a history, you might want to keep in communication with the credit card company and let them know what is going on. Questions, comments, put them in that comment section below. Otherwise, I thank you for watching. And as always, please go to proudmoney.com where we do credit card reviews. We talk personal finance, we talk deals, and all sorts of other fun stuff too. If you're not leaving a comment or you're not going to the website, what you're doing next is watching that video.